of the world's biggest mysteries is the Great Pyramid of Giza. It is the only pyramid on the planet that has 8 sides, not 4. Each of the pyramid's 4 sides are evenly split from base to tip by very subtle concave indentations. It is believed that the discovery was made in 1940 by a British Air Force pilot named P. Groves as he flew over the pyramids. Groves reported noticing that strange sight and took photographs showing shadows that revealed the indentations. Some believe these subtle lines are only visible from above, and it dusk till dawn on a spring or autumn equinox. This leads some conspiracy theorists to think that the ancient Egyptians built the pyramids to perhaps communicate with someone above. On the east side of Cheops, pyramids usually have outside blocks, and these outside blocks have been removed, revealing the huge underneath blocks. These larger blocks would have gone unnoticed if smaller outside blocks hadn't already been removed. Even the visible outside blocks are an impressive size, and in some cases, provide shelter from blistering heat of the day. It is estimated that they comprise of 2.4 million stone blocks averaging 2.5 tons each, approximately, plus additional blocks weighing considerably more lying deep within the pyramid itself, which usually serve some type of special function. There are also a number of surface blocks that are identical to those seen in Cusco, Peru. Notice the unusual shaping of these stones and the strange nodules protruding from them. The very same method of shaping these blocks along the strange nodules can be found throughout Peru, indicating that the exact same method of construction. The stones of the Great Pyramid are placed with organised precision. As you can see in this close-up, precision cuts have been made as part of an overall construction. There are many blocks that have been disappearing over the years. However, the Great Pyramid would have had a number of further outside layers as well as a limestone covering. This would have given it a white covering. It's even speculated that the pyramid tip was in fact covered in gold, making it a tremendous sight across the Egyptian landscape. The similarities in construction of blocks between Egypt and Peru don't stop there. Huge blocks were precisely cut and placed, sparking suggestions that the secret knowledge was basically passed from country to country. The oldest pyramids in the world are in fact found in Carel in Peru, an amazing site that is little known. Not many people actually do visit these. Carel was a large settlement in the Sup Valley, some 200 kilometers north of Peru's capital in Lima. Carel is the most ancient city of the Americas and well-studied site of the Norte Chico civilization. Carel was discovered not too long ago, 1948. The Carel pyramids, as discovered in 1948, are estimated to be around 5,000.
Yo, Big Christian, what's up, man? How you doing, bro? Welcome, man.
These amazing pyramids not only have been pillaged, but were covered in intricate carvings, again possessing precision-cut stones. The shaping of precision cutting of stones can be found worldwide, and we've seen these all over the world and representations of these. The same ideas around the world around the same time. Huge blocks of stone have been cut and placed even in burial mounds throughout Europe. In a location called Meershout, in a Neolithic chamber cairn, a passage grave located on the Orkney Islands, these strange blocks have also been discovered in the same locations. Like many of Neolithic chambers, the passageway is perfectly aligned with the midwinter solstice. Believed to be have been built around about 2800 BC. Mayer's house.
Yo, what's up?
Is
Santa,
the
what's going on?
largest and most impressive of the all chamber tombs on the Orkney Islands.
Yo, what's up, Moonrake? How you doing, man?
Was designated
Yeah, really.
an UNESCO World Heritage
up, dude?
Site in 1999, and the passage entrance of Meershout aligns perfectly with the morning sun of the midwinter solstice, allowing the sunlight to flood the chamber, revealing the true size
Good, man. Nice,
of
bud.
the
Nice.
huge blocks used in construction. It is truly a work of art. Precision cut stones have carefully been placed, supporting one another, even at the apex of the roof. Neolithic chambers found all over the world are very, very similar. This particular one in New Range in Ireland is also aligned to the winter solstice and contains intriguing megalithic blocks, some of which must weigh hundreds of tons, which again reveal the magnificence during the winter solstice and sunlight as it floods the chamber. Huge blocks of stone have also been precisionally cut and placed in other countries around the world, like these found in Italy. Also discovered in Italy is the Acropolis of Altri, which is a town that was built inside an old fortress wall. Again, the centre building of Altri has been precisionally placed and is in fact aligning itself with the heavens. The masonry
Aw, thanks, buddy.
is nearly identical to that of the famous polygonal wall of the Greeks.
Thanks, man.
And stands around 30 feet
So kind.
in height. The wall itself is a defensive league against the Velocci and the Samnites around 550 BC.
Moonraker, you can pull up as many quotes as you want. I'm sorry, I got
Is a
upset
technique wherein the
before.
visible surfaces
You can quote to your
of the
heart's
stones
desire.
are dressed
I'm
in
sorry.
straight sides and joints. You can clearly see where newer construction has been built on layers of the old wall.
All good.
This method of new construction on top of older walls is foundation, just the same in Cusco, Peru, whereas ancient pre-Inca walls are much more superior and require no mortar to hold them together. The method of cutting huge blocks and placing them it is pretty much of an old mystery that defies rational explanation in modern times.
Alright,
There is evidence worldwide of amazing rock cutting skills, like this in Afghanistan. As to what tools were used to create these incredible works of art also remain a mystery. The cutting and shaping of these huge stone blocks in Ethiopia could not be an easy task whatsoever. Why was there so much effort undertaken for these things to take place? Apart from the ancient and incredible methods of key-locking stones together, we also find parts of the blocks of stone vitrified, making important areas of the stone even stronger. This method can only be carried out by applying the stone to temperatures well beyond that of a traditional fire could create. The incredible stone cutting is common throughout ancient sites all around the world. This wall is found in Peru, where even small pieces of stone make up its construction. Similar precision cuts are also found throughout Egyptian walls, suggesting this knowledge circumnavigated the globe in ancient times. Many have asked, why use huge blocks of stone? What was their purpose? It is theorized that cutting and moving such huge stones must have been relatively easy. Stone walls throughout even Japan show the same incredible precision on laying of these blocks. Even the slightest precision cuts can be seen. The process of this must have been very time-consuming, but of great importance. Giant boulders have also been fashioned into precision-cut walls. These are around about 19 feet in height. The method of cutting stone is so much precision is a mystery that baffles us today. Complete buildings have been cut out of bedrock. Such buildings have doorways, inner rooms and passages, all cut from a single piece of rock. However, many of the buildings situated around the world have long been abandoned, a lost history with so many unanswered questions. In some cases, whole cities have been carved out of granite bedrock, leaving tourists to wonder why and how these mysterious locations were created. Some buildings show exquisite carvings that have stood the test of time. Others have become popular tourist attractions, such as this one, literally carved out of a mountainside that featured in an Indiana Jones movie. This single piece of construction was carved from a single huge block of stone, the corners of which are so sharp they could cut your fingers. Now, mainstream archaeologists would have us believe all these constructions were created by the use of brass and copper tools, which in many cases are much softer than the rock that they were actually used on. Around the globe is evidence of machine-cut marks on pieces of stone. On close-up, you can see clearly the rock has been bored out using some type of machinery, leaving the circular marks behind. The same applies to this piece of stone, which is rose quartz granite, one of the strongest rocks in the world. Not only has it perfectly a round circle being bored out of this piece, but the circular inner part of this stone is also present. Note the spiral-shaped pattern on the side, indicating the method of how this piece of rock was cut. Surely some type of machinery must have been involved. Further evidence of machine-cut holes through stone, this time from Japan. Similar bore holes have been also discovered in Turkey and in Lebanon. The vitrification of stone is also evident around the world. This precision-cut temple room has almost mirror-like walls. This can only be done by applying huge temperatures to them, rubbing them down and heating again and again. To get such a smooth, polished wall would take many years of heating and polishing. As to how such heat was generated remains a mystery. These pentagonal boreholes in stone were discovered in Massachusetts in the US and have been referred to as star holes. They consist of numerous shapes and sizes often cut into granite stone. But why these shapes were cut remain a mystery, including the method that was used to do so. These relatively new discoveries have baffled the academics. However, others, more precisely cut, have been found in other countries, such as these star holes found in Norway, which clearly show evidence of machine marks. As to why the unusual marks appear in these stones, nobody seems to have any idea, often many hundreds of miles away from any ancient sites. Some believe that these star holes in Norway consist of strange patterns for certain reasons. There are numerous different shapes, just like those discovered in Massachusetts in the US. On close examination, the Norway star holes show evidence again of some type of boring machine. On close examination, we always see these types of evidence in these inner ridges. They are and always are consistent, like machine marks that have rotated and cut through the rock almost a millimetre per revolution. Science is yet to find an explanation as to how these star holes were actually created. The landscape itself in Volda, in Norway, is littered with these mysterious holes, some of which were not completed, as you can see on this picture. The same method of boring out incredible strong rock can be found around the globe. This borehole, or should we say the mark, is in fact in a rock in granite stone in Egypt and is cut with precision on a spiral cutting motion. Some giant blocks are also said to show evidence of machine marks, as well as curious drill holes which have been found in them. No matter what country you visit, it would seem that the ancients managed to cut and shape stone relatively easily. This strange construction in Istanbul shows interlocking stones with a cord-out circle in the middle of them. It is assumed this was a method of distributing water, seeing that the huge blocks of stone fit together, creating a tight fit around the circle.
Yo, you'll be going to Canada soon. Nice, man. Nice, dude. Congrats, dude. Amazing, dude. Where are you going? What cities?
Somehow managed to get these cut marks within them. Minute precision. This can only take place by use of extremely strong specialised tools. This rock, small stone, only measures a couple of inches in diameter. These stone causeways seem to show evidence of machine marks as well. As to what they were actually used for remains a mystery, and there's more than one of these around the world. There's several of them. In some cases, these huge areas of cut stone occasionally run off into the sea, looking like some type of ship launching mechanism. This amazing piece of stonework was discovered in India and is fashioned from a single piece of granite stone. On close-up, it reveals an incredible precision of cuts that were required to manufacture this piece, including the smoothing and the rubbing of this stone. Other profound mysteries of the ancient times is the ancient Egyptian dagger belonging to Tutankhamun. Discovered in 1925, the dagger was forged from a type of metal which has fallen from a meteorite. The blade's high nickel content strongly suggests an extraterrestrial origin according to what science has concluded. Just as spectacular as Tutankhamun's dagger is the Beth Sharim glass slab. To create this huge piece of glass from stone would require tremendous heat that only is found in modern day refineries. There is no current explanation to the Beth Sharim slab and how it was created. Archaeologists continue to study the find to date. In more recent times, this giant metal bowl was unearthed in Java. The origins of the bowl remain again a mystery. After several days, the metal bowl was finally unearthed. Estimated to be around 3,000 years of age, archaeologists were shocked at its immense size. Now, to fasten such a large bowl out of a single piece of metal would require significant engineering and most certainly some type of machinery. The bowl measured almost 9 feet in diameter. As you can see from security officers that were called in to guard the site. The biggest problem came when it was trying to work out how to move this immense bowl. Eventually it was decided to hoist the bowl out using a crane and transport. The operation took a number of hours and slowly the metal bowl was
Great, man. That's awesome, dude.
However, some hours later, Jawa News reported that the metal bowl mysteriously fell from the flatbed truck and shattered into hundreds of pieces. This discovery was mysteriously lost in error. To finish up on, I'd like to touch on the discoveries of considering of ancient star maps. As we can see in this image, there are two different sets of pyramids here from South America and in Egypt. Both seem to align to Orion's belt. Numerous ancient artifacts have been discovered showing the fascination of the moon and the stars. The ancient discovery shows that the moon is in fact in good detail. The fascination with the stars in ancient times spanned the globe, often showing intricate carvings on buildings such as churches. These temples were scattered around in numerous places like India and Ethiopia and Bolivia, and of course the representation of the star pattern can clearly be seen upon them. The incredible star map made from solid gold was discovered in Peru, showing planets, the moon and stars. The star map is thousands of years old and is also thought to contain secret information. It has also been examined by historians for many decades with limited success. An Inca elder believes the map to show the origin of their great deity Viracocha, who is believed to have come from somewhere amongst the stars. Viracocha is said to have been a Peruvian god that travelled to their lands and brought great knowledge to the people. He is often identified in pre-Inca carvings, like this one, situated on top of the Gate of the Gods. The Gate of the Gods is said to be the doorway constructed of huge precision cut stones, and as you can see they certainly are, with intricate carvings, and again, like many other ancient monuments around the world, they have been aligned to the stars and contain significant measurements. Yet another example of an amazing stone cutting technique created from nothing more than soft copper and brass.
The tombs of ancient Egypt, the sphinxes and the pyramids are all in their own ways mysterious. But perhaps the greatest mystery of all is how these structures were built. Can the traditional view of ancient Egypt explain it? The ancient Egyptians used a variety of
Yo, Sedgwick. Yeah, man, I'm doing well, dude. Hope you're doing well too, buddy.
Large amounts of limestone, and among the array of other stones, they favoured black, grey and red granite from Aswan, a city in Egypt. The quarries around Aswan revealed the techniques used by the ancient Egyptians to quarry and cut the stone that forms the Great Pyramid at Giza. These quarries are still in use. Granite features quite heavily in Egypt, but how was this granite quarried and cut? The official explanation for granite quarrying states that during the period of the Old Kingdom, 2650 to 2152 BC, quarrying techniques consisted of prying loose stones from the surface of the quarry. However, by the time of the New Kingdom, which began in 1539 BC, quarrying techniques had advanced. Archaeological evidence suggests that the Egyptians hacked off the upper layers of weathered granite first. They then dug a trench around the granite to be cut. After the required depth of the trench was measured using a cubit rod, the workers cut in beneath the rock. They likely then cleared a pathway on one side of the cut granite and pushed it out horizontally rather than trying to lift it upwards. But how was the granite carved? How was it carried and removed? Firstly, the official explanation again. The Egyptologists maintained that the granite was cut and shaped using diorite pounding stones and carved using flint and copper chisels. The granite was carried by pulling 300-ton obelisks on wooden rollers, and then the 70-ton blocks were hauled up ramps. Although this remains the most likely explanation, it's not the only one, and it also has some problems. For a start, it has never ever been demonstrated.
Nice,
despite
man, nice.
the very best efforts of
Nice.
certain
Congrats,
television
man, that's
companies
great.
that have erected obelisks and hauled blocks.
They
They
bien,
didn't tell you
they
the
bien
block
ça.
weighed a ton, and it took 10 people to move it on a flat surface. There are
Certainement.
70-ton blocks inserted 150 feet up in the air, which were carefully placed into position. If they were hauled up ramps, it would have been a monumental effort. But what are the myths and legends concerning the construction of the monuments? What's the oral history? Oral history, despite skepticism from various academics, tends to have a degree of truth in it. The myths and legends will tell you there are stones that melt. What would cause that? Could it be some kind of rock-softening liquid? Stones that float? Is this acoustic, harmonic levitation? Reported from around the world is apparent evidence of drills, swords and lathes in ancient Egypt. Are these machine tools? Perhaps they could explain the ancient monuments in Egypt today. Another interesting mystery is connected with the Great Pyramid. Looking at the pyramid from a satellite's viewpoint, you can see something which very few people are aware of. The Great Pyramid appears not as a four-sided pyramid, but as an eight-sided pyramid. What are these lines which appear to divide into eight? They're not visible from the ground unless you actually know what you're looking for. The first evidence of the Great Pyramid apparently having the eight sides is a photograph taken from the air in 1940 by British Air Force pilot P. Groves, who was flying over the pyramid. He happened to notice the concavity and captured it in the now famous photograph. He wasn't looking for it and didn't know it existed, but managed to photograph the pyramid when the sun
Oui,
was just in the
j'étais
right
à
position.
Paris
You can see the north face of the
2002.
pyramid divided into an
C'était très
illuminated
belle là.
section and a non-illuminated
Aussi
section,
au
and that will only be visible if
Mont
the sun is
Saint-Michel
striking right across the face. Did the
et
ancient Egyptians build it like this?
Britannie
If
et
so,
choses.
why? A lot of people who know about the eight sides of the pyramid
Paris,
believe
c'était
it
très
was
belle.
discovered in 1940. It was actually first mentioned in the 19th century by Sir William Matthew Flinders Petrie, the famous English Egyptologist and a pioneer of a systematic method in archaeology and preservation of artifacts. Petrie held the first chair of Egyptology at the United Kingdom and excavated many of the most important archaeological sites in Egypt with his wife, Hilda Petrie. Some consider his most famous discovery to be that of the Meneptah stele, an opinion on which Petrie himself concurred. Petrie developed the system of dating layers based on pottery and ceramic findings. During studies performed at the site, Petrie noticed a hollow in the core masonry in the center of each face, and it is actually measurable. This unique and relatively unknown feature is much easier sighted from the air, but under favorable lighting conditions, it can also be viewed from the ground. What was the purpose for concave Great Pyramid sites? Perhaps as the case of the earlier Red Pyramid, also called the North Pyramid, the largest of the three major pyramids located at the Dashur necropolis in Cairo. The slightly concave walls were intended to increase the stability of the pyramid's mantle casing stones. Others contend it was a flaw of the designers, or was important for the vibratory aspect of the pyramid, if it had been built as some kind of acoustic machine. Yet other researchers and authors have proposed their own theories about the concavity of the Great Pyramid. Some of these theories propose that the concavity in measurement could represent the three lengths of the year: solar, sidereal, and animalistic. But this has, of course, not been proven. Inside the Great Pyramid is the King's Chamber, a room about 30 feet long, 19 feet across, and about the same height. There are the granite beams, 5 layers of them, which create the ceiling of the King's Chamber. These were taken from Aswan, 500 miles away, and brought to this position, which is 150 feet above ground level. Each of these beams weigh between 50 and 70 tons each. They are completely flat, as are the walls, which are all granite. The famous red granite sarcophagus is the only object inside the Great Pyramid. The sarcophagus is very large, with an estimated weight of about 3.75 tons. So it was probably placed in the chamber during construction. It follows the form of early dynastic sarcophagi, a flat-sided box with a groove on the inside to support the lid with one end open to allow the lid to slide into place, and 3 pins to seal the lid when it was in place. However, the sides of the coffer are not well finished. There are clear saw marks on the outside, and on the northwest corner the saw appears to have been cut too deep on more than one occasion. There are also the remains of a number of drill holes which the masons tried to smooth over but could not fully remove. The cover of the sarcophagus is missing, as is the king's mummy. Some have suggested that it was a substitute sarcophagus hastily prepared when the original was damaged, but there is no evidence to support this, and it doesn't explain why it's unfinished. It is by no means clear that the king's chamber was actually intended for a burial. If it was the first and only time that a burial chamber was placed above the entrance. Outside the pyramids is the Great Sphinx. We're all familiar with the Sphinx. Inside the Sphinx chamber is the weathering, which was identified by Robert Schoch as water erosion. This is not wind erosion. Wind is normally horizontal. This is water erosion over a long period of time. So, when they hollowed the Sphinx enclosure out, where did they put the blocks they took out? They put them outside, surrounding what's called the Valley Temple. There are 2 temples right in front of the Sphinx. One is the Valley Temple, one is the Sphinx Temple. The Valley Temple is the one you can go into when you visit. Inside the Valley Temple you have granite-lined walls, and this is where we start to notice these strange construction techniques. L-shaped blocks. This is granite, don't forget. These are not lumps of clay. They're quite heavy. Some of the smaller ones weigh half a ton. The Aswan quarry is where all this granite came from, and on the way there you come to this unfinished obelisk. It looks like it's merely a lump of granite stuck in the ground, which it is. It's very big. It's about 130 feet long and 7 to 10 feet deep around the edge. There are other obelisks presumably taken from the same quarry, because this is the only granite quarry in Egypt. But there are marks on the obelisk on the top left. What are these marks? Why are they there? Why are they necessary? They are quite regular. They look like some sort of scoop marks. Were they caused by the quarrying process, by pounding diorite stones? Someone has apparently made a calculation that if you have a diorite pounding stone and you're pounding it on granite, how long would it take to remove that amount of material to fit a wide trench, say 30 feet deep? And the answer was 35 years. Because you can pound granite with a stone, you can get any old hammer and do the same thing, and you remove about an inch layer over a square foot in 5 hours if you work continuously. But if you ever try pounding anything, you'll know your arms will go very rapidly. But of course, we're told to believe that these same pounding stones were used to carve these obelisks at Luxor, beautifully proportioned objects with apparently no mistakes. You can't rub out a mistake in granite, so we are apparently to believe that these incredible statues are the result of pounding with diorite stones. When it comes to iconic 20th century pioneers in electromagnetic research engineering, usually Nikola Tesla comes to mind, but rarely is the name Ed Leedskalnin ever mentioned, a man that received very little recognition for his incredible feats of architecture, a man that has been shrouded in secrecy and kept out of the public eye. In 1919, a real estate man by the name Moser was scouting for land across the back roads near the Everglades when he spotted a stranger. At first he thought it was a boy and was surprised to encounter a very small man. Moser, always friendly, offered a ride, to which the little man introduced himself. Edward Leedskalnin, who had recently immigrated from Latvia and that had travelled to the Everglades to look for a specific Mrs. Moser, always well. The Mosers selflessly took young Ed into their home and nursed him back to health. Ed talks of his travels across Tibet and living with the monks, learning their way of life as well as meditation, the power of qi, and seemingly impossible feats. They listened with respect to his story and of his search all over America for the right type of land. "I'll know when I find it," he said. "It's for my sweet 16. He would never explain who she was. As soon as Ed regained his health, he continued his search around the country for a special location. Crazy Ed and his rusty bike became the butt of many local jokes. Neighbors watching him prod the ground began rumors by saying that he was hunting for buried treasure. Ed always rejected the good farmland, and people often wondered why, to which he only smiled. One day, he brought Moser to a remote plot of land. Moser was astounded, as Ed had picked the worst acre of the state. It was all bedrock, which you couldn't plow nor farm it. Moser, shaking his head, gladly gave his friend Ed a small section. A few weeks later, Moser's curiosity got the better of him. He dragged his wife out through the brush to see what Ed could possibly be doing with that land. As they turned the corner, they couldn't believe their eyes. Ed had somehow cut a 10-ton block of solid coral right out of the bedrock and hoisted it into the air. As they nervously approached his flimsy tripod on the block, which could crush them in an instant, they realized there was something more than craziness in Ed. How on earth did he do this? Ed smiled and said, "It's not difficult really. The secret is in knowing how." Why did he do it? He smiled again. "Someday my sweet 16 will come." Moser and his wife were astonished. Working alone, Ed cut more blocks. He made slab walls, tables, chairs, a crescent moon, a water fountain, and a sundial. Every single block is cut and set with great precision and locked without mortar. All the locals that visited gaped at this accomplishment. Ed was always friendly but firm. He would never tell his secret techniques, and he would always stop work immediately when people came near. Trying to catch him at work, the neighbors took to spying. Some people swear they saw the rocks move. Ed could somehow sense prying eyes, and he would simply stop working and would patiently wait until they gave up trying to discover his secrets. One of his neighbors, Charles Williams, remembers, "I was around 7 years old and I was born and raised about 300 yards from Coral Castle, and I would see Ed quite often at this little country store. He was a small man, and I don't think he was probably taller than I am, about 5'6", and probably weighed somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 pounds. He always looked frail and sickly, but obviously he was very strong. He would show us his electrical machine and how he makes electricity." Francis Wilson, another neighbor, says he was a very gentle, kind person, of course highly intelligent. Many people thought that he was a little odd. Some nights we would sit in the moonlight and walk around in his park. When asked why he made the park, he would simply say, "Someday my sweet 16 is coming." He would look up at the stars and he would get very ethereal. He always spoke of her as a sweet 16, as she never grew any older. It was kind of nice. There were many rumors about mysterious Ed. One such rumor says that he was an eccentric miser and kept a stash of money. For years, Ed felt safe in isolation away from the harsh realities of the cities. Late one evening in the 1930s, a gang of youths waited until he was alone in Coral Castle. He could never have imagined such a shocking intrusion into his private world. The attack prompted the most extraordinary fate of his life. Barely surviving a brutal robbery, Ed decided to seek safer ground. When he moved, Ed took more than his toothbrush. He took Coral Castle itself. He hired a local truck driver, and with characteristic secrecy, he politely asked the man to step around the corner, and it would be loaded in just a minute. Piece by piece, Ed moved all 3 million pounds of rock, 10 miles to its present location near Homestead, Florida. No one ever imagined to see how he lifted the giant rocks, which weighed up to 30 tons apiece. The truck driver was also astonished to see huge blocks loaded onto his truck within a few minutes. A gentleman by the name of Charles Valores, who works at a local rock quarry, was asked to try an experiment, to cut a giant block of oolite with diamond-tipped power saws. However, cutting alone took several hours. The only way to break the block free was to use brute force. Then, as part of a test, they looked for any unusual buoyancy in the rock itself. Using a 600 horsepower crane, they attempted to lift the rock. After the crane almost tripped over, they managed to drag the block only a few yards. Quarry workers were perplexed as to what type of equipment would it take to duplicate Coral Castle. It just couldn't be done, Charles Valloris comments. Not with modern equipment. I wouldn't cut more than 4 foot long and 32 inches wide. That's the most I'll cut, and you saw the struggle we had getting it out with that machine, he said. After he died, researchers checked some of the instruments that he was using, and they were very primitive: chisels and hammers, ropes and pulleys. No one can understand even today how he managed to cut and move the huge stone blocks. Ed had always said that he knew the secrets of anti-gravity and magnetic fields, and he also said that he knew how to build the pyramids. So, it appears he was telling the truth. Just as he always worked in secret, he also preferred to take his own photographs, posing in one particular suit using a box brownie. One morning in December of 1951, Ed put on his suit, hopped on a bus and checked into Miami's county hospital. The doctors were appalled to find him near to death from malnutrition. For a while he was under their care, and then one day he suddenly died, quietly in his sleep. Even after his death, Ed left a few surprises. Neighbors guarded the grounds until authorities could make an official investigation. They found his living quarters as ingenious as the rest of Coral Castle. They also found $3,800 in crisp $100 bills and what resembled to be a treasure map. All attempts to follow the directions on the map were futile. Nothing seemed to correspond to normal, three-dimensional geometry. Ed left many mysteries, a lot of money, and a castle for his Sweet 16. Was she a real person, or was she just a dream? Coral Castle continued to baffle scientists, engineers and scholars since its opening to the public in 1923. Many stories and wild theories emerged over the years about Ed and how he built his castle. Some say he levitated the blocks with psychic powers or by singing to the stones. Others suggested Ed had arcane knowledge of magnetism and so-called earth energies. Coral Castle has appeared countless times in books, magazines and television shows. Rock musician Billy Idol even wrote a hit song about the place, Sweet 16. The park is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. For decades, the park featured a perfectly balanced stone gate that, despite its weight, would easily swing open with a strong breeze or the push of a finger. How it worked remained a mystery until 1986, when it stopped moving. When the gate was removed, it was revealed that it rotated on a metal shaft and rested on a truck bearing. As strange and amazing as the site is, its history is equally improbable. It was created by just one man, Ed Leedskalnin, who worked alone for 28 years until his death in 1951. It's quite obvious that moving large stones is no easy task. As an example, the most significant restoration of the megaliths of Stonehenge took place in 1958 and 1964. In an article in the New Scientist magazine dated January 2009, Brian Edwards, a student at the University of the West of England in Bristol, said, "Stonehenge isn't the only ancient site in the UK to have been transformed in recent years. Even many of the local people in Avebury are not aware that many of the stones were put up in the 1930s. David Batchelor, English Heritage's senior archaeologist, stated, "A decision not to include the work that took place at Stonehenge in any of the official guides was taken in the 1960s, the first restoration being in 1901. One of the learning stones was straightened and set in a concrete base. Further drastic renovations continued in the 1920s, where 6 stones were moved and re-erected. About 40 years later, a crane was used to reposition 3 more stones and a fallen lintel was actually replaced." Edwards went on to say, "In many cases, there's a huge difference between what historians know and what the public are consciously aware of at such sites. But one thing is for sure, all restorations were a tremendous undertaking. Lifting the huge blocks of stone was next to impossible, as larger equipment was brought in to deal with the situation. How one man was able to move such huge stones as Coral Castle on his own, with his own basic equipment, is scientifically impossible. As to who Ed often referred to as his Sweet 16 was never discovered. His amazing monuments will stand the test of time, a dedication to a mystery woman perhaps. No one has ever satisfactorily explained how Ed managed to create such a masterpiece. Some suggest he knew how to levitate stone using sound or electricity. Others believe he was party to some extraterrestrial secrets like the ones imparted to so many ancient civilizations around the world. Or perhaps it's just amazing what some people can do with a broken heart. A study carried out on the monumental stones consisting the Pumapunco site in Tiahuanaco, Bolivia, proves that the stones are ancient artificial geopolymer and are not carved with simple hammerstone or unknown technology or by extraterrestrials. It is the human genius, intelligently exploring the resources of its environment, who created these marvels. Tiahuanaco on Lake Titicaca in Bolivia is a village known throughout the world for its mysterious Gate of the Sun, ruins of temples and its pyramids. Archaeologists consider that this site was built well before the Incas, around 6 to 700 AD. The site of Pumapunku is right next door with the ruins of an enigmatic pyramidal temple built at the same time. Because it's not restored and developed for touristic activity, it is less known to the general public. However, there are two archaeological curiosities there. 4 giant red sandstone terraces weighing between 130 and 180 tons, and small blocks of andesite, an extremely hard volcanic stone whose complex shapes and millimetric precision are incompatible with the technology of the time. And for good reason, since archaeology tells us that the Tiahuanacans had only stone tools and no metal hard enough to carve the rock. But they would have carved the gigantic blocks of red sandstone. These ancient blocks are the largest of all American continents. And they were able to carry these hundreds of tons on the site, then adjust them precisely. Also, they would have been able to carve other smaller blocks made of volcanic andesite, and impossible to carve stone with an incredible finish. Archaeologists cannot give any rational explanations on how this was possible. Therefore, for the general public, the assumptions generally advanced to explain these wonders are the achievement by lost ancient super-civilization or by aliens' involvement. In November 2017, the scientists gathered samples taken in the red sandstone and andesite from the Pumapunco site. For the first time, these stones were analyzed under the electron microscope. This has never been done before. They discovered the artificial nature of the stones. They compared the monument stones with the local geological resources and found many differences. Andesite rock is a volcanic stone made from magma. It's composed mainly of silica in the form of plagioclase feldspar, amphibole, and pyrocene. But the scientists have discovered the presence of an organic matter based on carbon. Carbon-based organic matter does not exist in a volcanic rock formed at high temperatures because it is vaporized. It's impossible to find it in andesite rock, and because organic matter was inside the volcanic andesite stone, the scientists will have the opportunity to carry out a carbon-14 dating analysis and provide the exact age of the monuments. This organic element is a geopolymer based on carboxylic acids, which was therefore added by human intervention into andesite sand to form a kind of cement. The giant blocks of red sandstone raise another problem. Sandstone is a sedimentary rock composed of quartz grains and clay binder. There are several possible geological sources, but none correspond to the stones of the archaeological monuments. No known quarry is able to provide massive blocks of 10 meters long. In addition, the local stone is friable and small in size. The scientists have discovered under the electron microscope that the red sandstone of Pumapunco cannot come from the region because it contains elements such as sodium carbonate not found in local geology. Therefore, where does this stone come from? From hundreds to thousands of kilometers away. With what means have they been transported? In fact, electron microscopic analysis proves that the composition of the sandstone could be artificial and manufactured from cement. What is this technology mastered by the Tiahuanacans? Artificial stones were formed as cement, but it's not a modern cement, it's a natural geological cement obtained by geosynthesis. For this, they took naturally friable and eroded rock, like red sandstone from the nearby mountain, on the one hand, and from the other hand, unconsolidated volcanic tuff from the nearby Caracapia volcano in Peru to form andesite. They created cement, either from clay, the same clay that the Tiahuanacans used for pottery, and sodium carbonate salts from Laguna Cachi in the Altiplano Desert to the south to form red sandstone. For grey andesite, they invented an organo-mineral binder based on a natural organic acid extracted from local plants and other natural reagents. This cement was then poured into molds and hardened for a few months. Without a thorough knowledge of geopolymer chemistry, which studies the formation of these rocks by geosynthesis, it is difficult to recognize the artificial nature of the stones. This chemistry is not a difficult science to master. It's an extension of the knowledge of Tiahuanacans in ceramics, mineral binders, pigments, and above all, an excellent knowledge of their environment. Without the selection of good raw materials, these extraordinary monuments could not have been created 1400 years ago. Finally, the scientific discovery confirms local legends that say the stones were made with plant extracts able to soften the stone. This explanation has always been rejected by archaeologists because it made no sense. The evidence provided by the team of scientists from France and Peru shows that the oral tradition was right. They made soft stones that could harden. The hypothesis of the lost ancient super-civilization or alien intervention is false. Tiahuanacans were intelligent human beings. They knew their environment perfectly and knew how to exploit the resources brought by nature. In addition to the carbon-14 dating analysis, further studies will soon be carried out to determine whether certain amounts in the Cusco region of Peru have been built with the same scientific knowledge. The makeup of the sandstone megalithic blocks, weighing between 130 and 180 tons each, from Pumapunco, Tiahuanaco, Bolivia, was compared with 3 geological sandstone sites from the area. The SEM, EDS, XRD, and thin section results suggest that the sandstone megalithic blocks consist of sandstone grains from the Cala Marca geological site, cemented with an amorphous ferrosialate geopolymer matrix formed by human intervention by the addition of extra alkaline salt, natron, from the Laguna Cacha in the Altiplano, Bolivia. For many years, researchers along with archaeologists have remained stumped in regards to how such stones were precisionally cut. Strange and unusual ideas have circulated, from secret advanced technology to an extraterrestrial presence assisting our ancient ancestors. Some geometric inlays and cuts could simply be the byproduct of utilizing a mold that sets like stone. Are precision drill holes and boreholes cut out at a time when the mold was still not completely set, thus easy to manipulate? Could rods of straight twings or wooden rods have been placed in the molds prior to setting, creating what looks like to be precision drill marks? A whole method of how we look at these ancient stones has now just turned on its head. And it may not have just been the ancient civilizations of Bolivia and Peru that demonstrate such techniques. Rumors have been circulating that similar tests have been carried out in Egypt and that rock samples have been taken, some of which revealed human hair. Yes, Egyptian hair. That may have fell from one of the workers into the mold, maybe at a time of shaping or making sure there were no bubbles in the mix. However, Egyptian authorities may be keeping this quiet, as it could take away from some of the mysticism surrounding the incredible Egyptian pyramids. After all, the country relies on its tourist industry. Professor Joseph Daviditz has explained the intriguing theory that made him famous. He shows how the pyramids were built by using re-agglomerated stone, a natural limestone treated like a concrete, and not with huge carved blocks hauled on fragile ramps. Archaeology bears him out, as well as hieroglyphic texts, scientific analysis, religious and historical facts. Here we finally have the first complete presentation on how and why the Egyptian pyramids were built. We discover its brilliant creator, the great scribe and architect Imhotep. Joseph Daviditz sweeps aside the conventional image which cripples Egyptology and delivers a captivating and surprising view of Egyptian civilization. He charts the rise of this technology, its apogee with the pyramids at Giza, and the decline. Everything is logical and brilliant. Everything fits into place. Chapter by chapter, the revelations are sensational, especially when Joseph Daviditz explains why the pharaohs stopped building great pyramids because of an overexploitation of raw materials and a likely environmental disaster. We understand why Cheops and Ramses II represent two Egyptian civilizations completely different in their beliefs. On the one hand, the god Num mandates Cheops to build his pyramid in agglomerated stone, while on the other hand, the god Amun orders Ramses to carve stone for the temples of Luxor and Karnak. Further studies carried out at the Bent Pyramid reveal that a comparison was made of the solid-state spectra of the outer casing stone from Sneferu's Bent Pyramid in Dachau, Egypt, with two quarry limestones from the area. The results suggest that the casing stones consist of limestone grains from the Tura quarry, cemented with a calcium silicate gel formed by human intervention by the addition of extra silica, possibly from the Fayum area. These results again seemingly provide evidence that these stones were in fact artificial in nature. Of course, such a discovery of artificial stones is only a small part of the many mysteries that continue to surround Egypt and other locations around the world. Some of the hardest stones in the world that have been clearly fashioned and cut to remain, some on gigantic scales, such as the unfinished obelisk, the tombs of Saqqara, and other huge stone blocks. It seems slowly but surely science may prevail as to how our ancient ancestors created so many magnificent constructs. Further tests on ancient sites around the world are much needed if we are to determine if similar artificial stones have been created and utilized.
New discoveries are revealing ancient civilizations that predate that 5,000 years.
Both of these cultures had the same advanced machining with these stones.
We may not even be able to do today with the tools that we have available.
Is this proof of an advanced ancient civilization on a global scale?
It was the gods' technology, and so that's why we can't do it again.
The mysterious site of ancient Baalbek in modern-day Lebanon has been a puzzle to archaeologists and historians since its discovery. The site consists of one of the largest Roman temples ever discovered and contains huge stones, one weighing a staggering 1,200 tons. Why were such giant stones used, and how were they moved from the quarry site to Baalbek? The site also had numerous myths connected with it. It's said that Cain built it after being cursed by God, that King Solomon built it using an army of jinn for the Queen of Sheba, or that Nimrod constructed it using giants and called it the Tower of Babel. Ancient Baalbek, the Greek Heliopolis, or City of the Sun, is a large hilltop site encompassing the ruins of a huge Roman town and religious complex in eastern Lebanon. It's located in the Bekaa Valley region, about 50 miles east-northeast of Beirut, in modern Lebanon. Baalbek was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1984. The name Baalbek is formed from two words: Baal, the Semitic lord of the gods equated with Zeus or Jupiter, and Nebek, the Aramaic word for sources. Very little is known of Baalbek prior to the Greek conquest of Syria in 332 BC, though it was certainly an ancient Phoenician city and an important pilgrimage site in the ancient world for the worship of the sky god Baal and his consort Astarte, the queen of heaven in Phoenician. The focus of the city was a temple dedicated to Astarte and Baal, and the ruins of this early temple remain today underneath the later Roman temple of Jupiter. Traces of almost continual habitation over the last 8,000 to 9,000 years at Baalbek have been discovered, though a lot more work needs to be done before a complete history of the site can be attempted. After the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC, the region was controlled by the Greek Ptolemaic dynasty of Egypt, under which the town was called Heliopolis, probably after its Egyptian namesake. Heliopolis became Roman in 15 BC, and during this period the vast temples in the city became important places of worship of the Roman Empire. It was during the reign of Roman Emperor Septimus Severus from 193 to 211 AD that the great temple of Jupiter Baal was built, and its impressive ruins, which soar 72 feet into the sky, can still be seen today. In all, 3 temples were constructed in a number of phases over the next 300 years, that of Jupiter, god of sky and thunder, Bacchus, god of agriculture and wine, and Venus, goddess of love and beauty. On a nearby hill, the Romans also built the Temple of Mercury, but all that remains today of this building is a stairway carved from the rock. The still existing Temple of Bacchus is larger than the Parthenon of Athens, and as with all of the temples of the Roman complex at Baalbek, was spared destruction during the rise of Christianity by being converted to Christian church use. About 150 years after the Roman Empire fell, the Muslim Arabs arrived in the area, and the town returned to its original name, and since that time has been known as Baalbek. Vali Mahlouji, the London-based curator of Baalbek Archives of an Eternity, which showed at Beirut's Sursok Museum, hopes that Baalbek's 300 years of Roman rule would not overshadow its 10,000 years of continuous settlement and its prehistoric origins. Baalbek goes back to the beginning of when man settles, and there are not that many that have continuously been settled and had a living history. It shouldn't be reduced to the folly of a moment in history when those massive Roman temples were built, and to then embed the story of those epic and awe-inspiring stone structures. As Europe revels in the glories, romanticizes the sites, excavates them, they start claiming knowledge of these spaces in the face of the locals who are ignorant of what they have, their own past and connections to anything. The cornerstones of the earlier temple at Baalbek weigh over 100 tons, and the retaining wall monoliths each weigh 300 tons, presenting archaeologists with the problem of how they were moved and manipulated into place. These blocks, and another a mile distant from Baalbek, which weighs over 900 tons, are known today as the Baalbek stones and have been the subject of much heated debate over how they were moved from the quarry site and set up at Baalbek. Other researchers have posed the question why such massive stones were needed in the first place, as they seem much larger than they needed to be for the construction of the temple. The stones were more than 10 times the weight of the individual blocks which made up the Great Pyramid at Giza. The Romans reused these early stone blocks as the foundations for their own temples, but seem not to have moved them from their original positions. According to archaeologist and project researcher Margaretha von S., all temples were erected from limestone cut in quarries in close vicinity. The stones for the second phase of Jupiter Temple are especially remarkable because of their extraordinary size. For the podium of the temples, stones were cut up to 20 meters in length and 4 meters high, which weighed about 1,000 tons each. The transport of these stones to the temple is a reason why people admire this sanctuary. The trilithon, which consists of 2 large stones supporting a third, was mentioned as a remarkable feature in ancient texts. Today, it's the gigantic dimension of the ensemble that attracts people most. The enormous weight and mass of these stones has led to speculation whether the ancient population at Baalbek had some kind of supernatural help in constructing the site. Some have theorized about aliens with advanced technology, while others believe the myths surrounding Baalbek conceal the truth of what may have happened there in remote prehistory. The late author Zechariah Sitchin had his own theory about Baalbek. When and why was it all done? The Maronite Christians, who for generations deemed themselves custodians of the site before they were displaced by the Shiite Muslims, told legends of the giants who had built the colossal platform. I found the answers in the ancient Sumerian texts and related them in the Stairway to Heaven and the Wars of Gods and Men. The great stone platform was indeed the first landing place of the Anunnaki gods on Earth, built by them before they established a proper spaceport. It was the only structure that had survived the flood and was used by Enki and Enlil as the post-diluvial headquarters for the reconstruction of the devastated Earth. It's the only structure on Earth from before the flood. Author Graham Hancock, in his 2015 book Magicians of the Gods, put forward his own theory as to the origins of Baalbek. Hancock thinks it was one of the sites used around 12,000 years ago by a prehistoric worldwide superculture, which apparently left not a shred of evidence behind to show that it existed. The evidence revealed in this book shows beyond reasonable doubt that an advanced civilization that flourished during the Ice Age was destroyed in the global cataclysms between 12,800 and 11,600 years ago. But there were survivors known to later cultures by names such as the Sages, the Magicians, the Shining Ones, the Mystery Teachers of Heaven. They travelled the world in their great ships, doing all in their power to keep the spark of civilization burning. They settled at key locations: Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, Baalbek in the Lebanon, Gyges in Egypt, ancient Sumer, Mexico, Peru, and across the Pacific, where a huge pyramid has recently been discovered in Indonesia. Everywhere they went, these magicians of the gods brought with them the memory of a time when mankind had fallen out of harmony with the universe and paid a heavy price. There are many myths associated with Baalbek. One tradition says that the fortress of Baalbek is the most ancient building in the world. Cain, the son of Adam, was banished by God to the land of Nod for murdering his brother Abel, and built Baalbek in the year 133 of the creation during a fit of madness. He named it first after his son Enoch and populated it with giants who were punished for their sins by the flood. Another myth tells that Baalbek once belonged to the legendary Nimrod, a biblical figure described as a king in the land of Shinar who ruled this part of Lebanon. According to an Arabic manuscript, Nimrod sent giants to rebuild Baalbek after the Great Flood. In Islamic mythology, the temple complex was said to be one of Solomon's palaces, which was built by the jinn and given as a wedding gift to the Queen of Sheba. The loose blocks on the nearby quarry were apparently left there by the jinn when they went on strike.
From the earliest 13th century to nearly the end of the 16th, the vast empire of the Inca grew and thrived at its height, spanning an extensive area of nearly 800,000 square miles. From modern-day Quito in Ecuador all the way down to the west coast of South America to what is now Santiago, Chile. Despite having no written language, no concept of the wheel, no knowledge of how to smelt metal, and no significant draft animals to ride or pull their plows, the Incas nonetheless managed to carve a fabulous domain from the surrounding mountains and forests. Their mathematical and astronomical knowledge was on par with anything in the Old World during the same period, and they were able to keep detailed records of population densities and tax tributes by utilizing a rather ingenious system of quipus, or variously colored strings with differing numbers and patterns of knots that functioned similarly to an abacus. One of the most advanced technologies developed by the Inca was their mastery of stonework, and using very simple tools, they were able to construct enormous, elaborate structures using the so-called dry stone method, in which stones are carved so precisely that they can be fitted together without the use of mortar. Many of the temples, terraces and villages they built, such as the famed sites of Winaywana, Sacsayhuaman, and Machu Picchu, still stand today in varying degrees of preservation. The Inca also amassed huge quantities of gold and silver, some of which they used to cover the outer walls of their fantastic buildings. At the time the Spanish conquistadors arrived in present-day Peru in 1572, under the command of Francisco Pizarro, the Inca Empire was the largest in the pre-Columbian Americas, housing an estimated 10 million people with a complex society and sophisticated system of religious mythology all of their own. Among the many architectural wonders produced by this mysterious culture, one in particular stands out as being not only one of the most beautiful and intricate objects discovered in the region, but also one of the most enigmatic. The purpose of the strange Sayhuita monolith remains a conundrum to this day, centuries after it was first built, though everything from religious significance to topographical representation to engineering modeling to alien interference has been proposed for the reasons behind the perplexing relic. The site of Sehuita lies nearly 30 miles east of the city of Abancay in the Apurimac region of Peru and about 250 miles from the city of Cusco, once the center of the Inca Empire. The Apurimac region itself is home to several other significant archaeological sites, perhaps one of the most notable being the Yame Cayuc, a large complex located more than 11,000 feet above sea level that boasts a number of petroglyphs of people, jaguars, vicunas and llamas. There is also a small terraced temple complex called Sondor, which interestingly was believed to have been constructed by the Chanca, a culture active in the late intermediate period who were sworn enemies of the Inca. Another site constructed in the region by pre-Inca people is Yanaca, a series of ruined villages and terraces which are still in use by the local residents today. This site is one of the most important in Peru from an archaeological standpoint, as it consists of a large quantity of villages, the highest number of any other Peruvian site. Sehuite, though, is probably the best known of any of the sites in the region. Sehuite is thought to be derived from the Quechua word Sehuata, which roughly means place of orientation. Sehuite itself was once considered an important religious destination among the Inca, and according to later Spanish accounts, once contained a gorgeous temple with gigantic columns and large swathes of fabric ascented with wide bands made of pure gold. Legend has it that this temple was under the care of a priestess named Asape, who reportedly committed suicide by jumping into a gorge more than 1,000 feet deep, rather than being captured by the invading Spanish forces. Specifically, Sehuite seems to have been a hub of water worship. The Inca, who were polytheists, had many gods and goddesses whose spheres of influence were water-based. Copacabana, for example, was a lake goddess, while the weather god, Illapa, was said to possess a jug that contained the Milky Way galaxy and which he used to produce rain. Another rain god was also known as Con, and the goddess called Mamacucha, or Sea Mother, was a protector of fishermen and sailors. Perhaps the most important water god in the Inca canon, however, was Payacaca, a creator god and master of rainstorms. Payacaca, in fact, predated the Inca Empire, but was later adopted into the Inca pantheon of deities as the culture expanded their territory during the 13th century. The entire archaeological site at Sehuite is littered with numerous stone monuments of varying sizes, including fragments of sharply hewn staircases, a series of boulders with geometric designs known as the Rumihuasi, or stone house, and strange carved rocks with odd oval, square, circular, and canal-like depressions whose purpose is not clear. One rather anomalous structure at the site is a large rock with a substantial portion cleanly carved out, bearing a small stepped configuration protruding from the center, which has a curious little rectangular window. This stone, known by the locals as the Intihuatana, literally hitching post of the sun, is believed to be an indicator of the summer solstice, as on that date the sunrise is said to be centered directly in the small window at the middle of the monument. All of these artifacts were fashioned from a local igneous stone called andesite, a stunning enough feat of its own, for andesite is much harder than granite. The Inca possessed only bronze carving tools and perhaps some hammers made out of chunks of meteorite. The fact that the Inca stone masons were able to achieve such sharp and precise angles, utilizing such relatively primitive tools, is a testament to the high level of their craftsmanship. In fact, some researchers have theorized that these stories may in fact be even older than the Inca Empire, and were perhaps carved by the predecessors of the Inca, such as perhaps the cultures of the Viracochas or Pehuas. But by far the most peculiar and most celebrated object at Sehuite is the monolith itself, which now sits on a terraced hill known as Concacha, though it's not clear where the stone itself was sourced from and if the rock was moved to the site at some point in the distant past. Measuring approximately 13 feet wide and 6.5 feet long, the relic is a gigantic slab of stone fashioned into a rounded, roughly ovoid form, higher on one side than the other. The top of the stone is an astoundingly sophisticated three-dimensional sculpture bearing several different types of features. such as geometric shapes that resemble staircases, buildings, terraces, roads, rivers, ponds, tunnels, and canals or irrigation channels. In addition, the Sehuite monolith is also ornamented with many animal carvings, including birds, monkeys, frogs, fish, crabs, jaguars, and reptiles. All in all, the upper surface of the monolith is adorned with over 200 different carvings, each of them exceptionally detailed and well defined. Not surprisingly, the monolith has become a must-see artifact for tourists traveling in Peru. And indeed, the exquisite appearance of the monument and its uniqueness in the region have attracted a great deal of archaeological interest as well. For as specific as the Sehuite monolith appears in its function, the purpose of this mysterious relic is still completely unknown, though of course there have been a great deal of hypotheses put forward to explain what the stone might have been used for. Some researchers favor the idea that the monolith had religious significance, pointing to the purported relevance of the Sehuite site to the worship of various water deities and the proximity of a number of natural springs in the area near the stone. The monument itself then, with its rounded contours and the way the carvings themselves seem to encourage water flow between all the features, may have been some kind of ritualistic object, perhaps made with the intent of demonstrating some religious or mythological principle to pilgrims who came to the site to pay their respects. Then again, still other archaeologists speculate that the monolith may actually be a sort of three-dimensional map, either of the immediate area surrounding the site, the layout of Machu Picchu, the entirety of the Inca Empire, or perhaps even a miniature model of the universe as a whole, at least as its makers understood it. Those who endorse this interpretation not only assert that the geometric shapes strongly resemble aspects of a city with buildings and staircases surrounded by step terraces, but also that the carved animals might be symbolic depictions of various geographic features. For instance, a carving of a fish, pelican, octopus, or crab might suggest the location of a lake or sea. A frog or reptile might denote a pond or swamp, and a monkey or a jaguar might stand in for a patch of thick forest. One of the most intriguing theories, though, put forward by researcher Dr. Arlen Andrews, amongst others, is that the Sehuite monolith was actually designed as a type of engineering model to demonstrate irrigation flows in miniature before a full-scale construction project was attempted. Key to this theory is the notable presence of several small holes around the perimeter of the monument that would have caused any water poured onto the stone to flow off the edges, as well as a large bowl-sized depression at the very apex of the monument that seems to be where the water would have been poured when using the monolith for its intended purpose. Dr. Andrews even suspects that the ancients may actually have used liquid mercury as a stand-in for water on the stone, since mercury better approximates the large-scale movement of water on a scaled-down model, not having the particular properties of surface tension that water possesses. There are also several places on the monolith where the stone appears to have been edited. In other words, some features of the carvings were chipped away and other ones put in their place, which might suggest changes to the topography that the Inca wanted reflected in their model. It appears that several changes were made over quite a long period of time, indicating that the Inca might have been updating the stones as new information was gleaned, or as the lay of the land was altered. Some archaeologists have even conjectured that the relic was used as a kind of teaching tool in order to show aspiring Inca engineers and technicians how water flow worked with other various types of terrain. Significantly, the presence of several squared-off, zigzag-type designs situated near the edges of the monument very closely resemble a system of agricultural irrigation believed to have been deployed by the Inca and other ancient peoples. These channels, sometimes known as fingers, have been observed near the sea in the region of southeastern Peru and western Bolivia, known as the Altiplano or High Plateau. As recently as the 1970s, it was determined that these types of channels, dug only 8 to 12 inches deep, would be filled with water and in essence create what is known as a microclimate. This contained area, rising only about 18 inches above the soil and differing from the ambient climate to a small but significant degree, is extremely useful for growing crops, that might not thrive as well in the larger surrounding area, such as potatoes, root vegetables and other tubers. Study of the Sehuite monolith is ongoing, though archaeologists are keen to preserve the site as much as possible, leaving some areas of the complex untouched and attempting to limit tourist interference with the monument. The wonderfully unique relic is a fascinating window into the past and into the technological complexity of the Inca Empire.
In 1526, the Spanish conquistador Francisco de Montego arrived on the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico and found most of the great Maya cities deeply eroded and unoccupied. Many generations removed from the master builders, engineers and scientists who conceived and built the cities, the remaining Maya they encountered had degenerated into warring groups who practiced blood rituals and human sacrifice. The great city of Chichen Itza was reduced to piles of stones, with the vestiges of the buildings, pyramids and other structures left in ruin. The Maya elders who I have spoken with report that Chichen Itza was a teaching university and that different cultures throughout the Americas had access to a variety of sciences, agricultural studies and the healing arts for hundreds or thousands of years. We still do not know the true age of the Maya, but recent excavations by Dr. Richard Hansen at the El Mirador Basin in Guatemala show agriculture in the region flourishing around 2600 BC, over 5,000 years ago. We know now that the Maya developed a number of highly advanced sciences, highlighted by the spectacular knowledge of astronomy. They were skilled engineers and had mathematics which could calculate dates billions of years in the past and far into the future. It is estimated that when Friar Diego de Landa discovered texts and buildings and in use by the surviving people, he burned them and destroyed libraries, technical manuals, and the history of one of the most advanced cultures on the planet, leaving us wondering at the history of the Maya. In 1913, Sylvanus Morley, an American archaeologist working with the Carnegie Institute, received permission by the Mexican government to excavate the main acropolis at Chichen Itza. One of these buildings was the El Caracol, which he discovered was an astronomical observatory for charting the heavens. As the excavation team began to reassemble the building, they encountered a number of advanced design features which could only have been incorporated after significant research and development and an understanding and correctly aligning the central observatory with the cosmos. Through careful reconstruction and observation, we have made great strides in learning how the Maya used the observatory to chart the movement of specific planets, the beginning and conclusion of seasons, and other astronomical events. The El Caracol Observatory stands on a massive 75 by 57 meter platform, engineered to support the tower and counterbalance any movements in the Earth. To date, no surface-penetrating radar has been used to detect what lies inside the platform, but it appears that a drainage system was incorporated to keep water from accumulating on the surface. The terrace which connects the observatory to the platform measures 26 by 30 meters and contains engineering features that function in a surprisingly efficient manner as a viewing mechanism. 2 flights of stairs led to the highly complex cylindrical structure that sits on a round base 18 meters in diameter and which is covered in Puig-style friezes with projecting cornices. The tower, the main viewing area, stands 28 meters above ground and is surrounded by 2 massive curved slots. The west-facing slot drops down over 8 meters into the base of the building, while the eastern-facing slot is only a few feet deep. We'll return to these slots shortly, but it should be noted that each was designed to support a movable viewing apparatus that anchored at the base. The construction of the Caracol Tower contains a series of interesting technological and architectural innovations, culminating in 3 concentric cylinders separated by ring vaulting. The outer cylinder has 4 doorways at the cardinal point of the compass. A circular corridor separates it from the middle cylinder, which measures 8 meters in diameter. The second circle has 4 doors in a quincunx 5 points arranged in a cross arrangement in relations to those on the exterior. Like the first, it has a vaulted ceiling and contains a solid central core of masonry in which a narrow spiral passage leads to the high chamber with spy holes in the walls. The building was heavily damaged when it was discovered, and only 3 surviving spy holes provide us enough information to understand the function of the observatory. Astronomical observations were made by examining the angles traced by light travelling along the tunnel as formed by a long, narrow spy hole. Measurements of the angle between the right-hand edge of the external opening and the left-hand edge of the interior opening allow for extremely precise observations. What we now understand is that the first observation aperture faces directly south. The second aligns to the setting of the moon on March the 21st. The third faces directly towards the west and towards the point where the sun sets at the equinoxes on March the 21st and September the 21st. Finally, the second viewpoint through the same spy hole corresponds to the setting of the sun at the summer solstice on June the 21st. These details are the foundations of the Maya astronomical system, the X and Y upon which the more detailed observations are based. How, you might ask, were the Maya able to calculate the movements of Venus and other planets, including the Sun and the Moon? Archaeologists would have us believe that the naked eye was sufficient for these observations and calculations, but I think there is a missing piece to this puzzle. A good deal of the upper section of the observatory is damaged, and must have contained additional spy holes and other tools for viewing the heavens. The original design for the observatory appears to have been multifunctional, and may have included a number of engineering features that allowed for enhanced viewing. Because the tower was heavily eroded, we'll never know how the complete observatory looked when it was in operation, but there are a number of clues that until now have never been well understood. I wanted to get the opinion of an engineer to determine if what I suspected in the design of the terrace was possible. I called on Jim Ocon, a forensic engineer and expert on Maya construction techniques, to review my hypothesis and to comment on a function of the strange slots. Designed in the outer terrace are 2 slots, pits, that follow the curvature of the tower and support a viewing mechanism. The west-facing slot is approximately 8 meters deep and could have housed an articulating facade which moved with the movement of the planets. The smaller eastern slot is about 2.5 meters deep and had limited range and motion. I've reasoned that the Maya built these slots to support a viewing apparatus of a movable facade and fixed optics. This outer structure could be moved up and down depending on the operator and was manually positioned at the bottom of each slot. Ocon is convinced the Maya developed a wheel, evidenced by numerous toys covered with wheels, and I believe in the distant past the addition of mechanics or gears allowed the apparatus to move vertically and horizontally, like an elevator for observing the heavens. These new functions of the observatory would allow for day and evening observation. A unique engineering feature suggested by Ocon is a track system which supported the movement of the facade and conformed to the slots, interior siding and flooring. The track and base with wheels housed the moving apparatus and was manually operated within the interior of the terrace and accessed through a doorway designed in the western wall. We know the Romans used similar lift systems to rise and lower platforms at the massive Colosseum in Rome. These elevators were designed to move scenery, gladiators, and even wild animals into the main amphitheater for viewing entertainment. I believe the same type of elevator was used to operate the massive viewing facades within the observatory. The artist's rendering shows an approximate position of the facades and how they must have appeared. What we cannot know is what additional devices or tools were embodied into each section to observe the heavens. To view celestial movements, the Maya would have needed the use of optics, lens cut and polished and fitting into a device. The earliest known lenses are found in former Assyria, Iraq and Syria, and in Egypt, and date to around 750 BC. These early lenses were shaped from crystal and polished for optimum clarity. We don't see modern lenses until the Middle Ages, when the science of optics was conceived and the early telescopes developed. It's strange to note that although no lenses have ever been discovered in Central America, some of the most sophisticated crystal carvings of human skulls have been uncovered. The most noted of these skulls are the Mitchell Hedges, Aztec and Maya skulls, each cut, sanded and polished with an exacting level of precision found in modern craftsmanship. Until we find a lens, we can only assume that the Maya had a form of magnifying the planets they studied. El Caracol is unique among Maya observations because its design is not duplicated anywhere in the world and, as previously noted, appears to have been a teaching tool for higher learning. Because of its age, we're left with many questions as to its operation, function, and what the Maya may have discovered as they scanned the cosmos. We can only wait in anticipation for the next codices or sacred astronomy books to reveal themselves as archaeologists continue to unearth the ancient history of the Maya.
Somebody must have teached them, and this somebody must have been an extraterrestrial.
He witnessed a 14-foot, 10-inch skeleton. All of these have now disappeared.
Such an exciting event to be at.
I walked into the venue and I was completely surprised.
There's an endless list of great people with brilliant research who've spent years studying things that are not in the mainstream media.
And this is what was on the computer, that picture. So here's a modern day story about the inner Earth.
They were not only interplanetary, but they were also an intergalactic civilization.
It's a pleasure to give the Stellar Citizen Award to Billy Carson.
Thank you so much.
I am so proud of you. You have no idea.
Thank you. You guys got me good.
Mesa Verde is a green sanctuary for the soul. Located in southwest Colorado near the Four Corners region, this massive geological uplift was once home to many ancestral pueblones, a term that has recently supplanted Anasazi in the archaeological world. Mesa Verde is Spanish for green table, and the area covered with juniper and pinyon trees indeed provide refuge from the harsher and drier landscape of the high desert below. Some of the continent's most spectacular cliff dwellings are found here, including Cliff Palace and Spruce Tree House. Occupied between 600 and 1300 AD, the mesa is cut by numerous canyons running generally north and south. These canyons are pocketed with giant rock alcoves under which the ancient people built large villages of sandstone. Cliff Palace, for instance, was inhabited between 1190 and 1300. It contained some 220 rooms and 23 circular kivas, subterranean ceremonial prayer chambers, the largest cliff dwelling in the American Southwest. This pueblo, a sort of ancient stone apartment complex, also included a round tower and a 4-story square tower from which the sacred sun watchers made their celestial observations. Unlike the cliff dwellings, the so-called sun temple was used exclusively for watching the skies. It is located on top of the mesa, rather along the cliff sides within the canyons. Perched at the southern edge of the mesa near the junction of Feeks Canyon and Cliff Canyon, this D-shaped structure lies a bit more than 300 yards southwest of Cliff Palace, which is located on the far side of the latter canyon. These two canyons, by the way, contained a total of 33 habitational sites. Most pueblo villages grew by accretion, as rooms were gradually added onto each other. On the other hand, the form of the sun temple was preconceived and executed with a single, coherent symmetry in mind. The structure, built probably around 1250 AD, consists of two concentric bows. Its southern wall, the metaphoric bowstring, is 122 feet long, while the curved north wall provides the temple's 64 feet width. The inner bow is bisected exactly by the inch by a recess of a few feet wide in the outer southern wall. Although the reconstruction walls are now an average of 6 feet high, they once rose to an estimated 11 to 14 feet. They were generally about 4 feet thick and composed of a central core of rubble and adobe, dressed with finely placed sandstone blocks. The floor of the building consisted of the mesa's bedrock, with no additional adobe flooring added. No external doorways or windows are found, except for one walled-up entryway near the southwestern corner of the structure. However, a number of the inner windows and curved doorways connect to some of the rooms, which total 24. The lack of wooden beams shows that the structure was unroofed and open to sunlight and starlight. No household goods of any kind, i.e. bowls, baskets, grinding stones, etc., were found in or near the building, which indicates the building's purpose was ceremonial rather than domiciliary.
In other words, this edifice truly deserves the name temple. Whether or not this was strictly a sun temple will be dealt with shortly. The archaeologist Jesse Walter Fuchs, who worked initially to unearth and reconstruct it in 1915, observed the following. The building excavated shows the best masonry and is the most mysterious structure yet discovered in the region, rich in so many prehistoric ruins. Almost every masonry block was assiduously pecked and shaped in order to fit perfectly into the walls. Some of the blocks were even sculpted or incised with geometric designs, similar to those commonly found on the indigenous pottery of the region. Other designs in the blocks include the so-called crow's foot, flowing water, and what looks like a ladder leaning against a wall. A few blocks are cut with a T-shape that resembles many of the doors and windows of other pueblos, though not in this structure. The design in these blocks suggests the walls were not plastered. The style of sculptured stones is very rare in American Southwest and indicates an influence from Mexico and Central America. There are 3 circular kivas incorporated in the architecture. These are not typical kivas. However, because they lack the normal features such as a fire pit, an air deflector, banquet bench along the wall, and a sepapu, a tiny hole in the floor that conceptually leads to the underworld. In addition, they are above ground, not subterranean. The 2 eastern kivas marked B and C on the diagram each have a narrow subterranean trench that leads from the plaza through an inclined shaft to a spot just south of the centre of each circular room. The western kiva marked A has a similar access from one of the small rooms to the south. On the eastern 2/3 of the structure, 14 mostly rectangular rooms enclose the plaza that contains 2 kivas, which are equal in diameter. On the western side, we find 10 rooms, 6 nearly square rooms, 1 circular room, and 3 quadrilateral rooms that surround the single kiva and conform to its shape. This kiva is slightly smaller than the other 2 kivas. 1 small triangular enclosed space also lies just northeast of the circular room. As the diagram shows, the north-south axis of the structure is shifted 5 degrees west of due north. A line drawn from the southwestern corner eastward past the building is tangent with the inner wall of another kiva, marked D. This separate kiva lies just over 20 feet from the southeastern corner of the main structure. One of the most unusual features connected to the Sun Temple, however, is the so-called Sun Shrine. Located at the southwestern corner of the building, this curious stone slab extends as part of the bedrock a few feet from the building. A masonry enclosure was constructed on 2 sides perpendicular to the other wall in order to protect it. The stone seems artificially worked, with sharp grooves radiating from a central basin. It has been suggested that these grooves represent solar rays. At the center of this depression are 3 indentations, one of which is offset. If a person sat on this stone, the masonry addition would be something like the arms of a chair. Gazing westward, an observer could watch the equinoctial sunset. Some researchers believe that the stone functioned as a kind of sundial. But does the Sun Temple live up to its name? Apparently so. A number of what we term solar solstice alignments are incorporated into the building as line-of-sight connections between 2 points. In the world of the ancestral Puebloans, the 4 solstice points of the horizons are more important than the cardinal directions. This is the same exact spots on the horizon where the sun rises and sets in either summer or winter, and are crucial to maintaining an agricultural calendar. The sun watcher performed the task of determining when to plant or harvest certain crops and when to perform various ritual activities. At the latitude of the Mesa Verde, the sun rises at 60.5 degrees azimuth the first day of summer. Azimuth is the angle measured in degrees from true north. North equaling 0, east equaling 90 degrees, south equaling 180 degrees, and west 270 degrees. On this day, it sets at 299 degrees. During the winter solstice, the sun rises at 119 degrees and sets at 240 degrees. The diagram shows how specific architectural features of the structure indicate the solstice times. For instance, a straight line extended from the sun shrine located in the southwestern corner of the building to room 1 in the northeastern corner is 60.5 degrees azimuth. Remember, the Sun Temple had no roof, so a person standing on a ladder at the Sun Shrine could see either another ladder or a pole that may have been erected in the very northeastern corner of this far room. When the sunrise point, which had gradually been moving northward along the horizon as spring progressed, finally reached this upright marker, the person could know it was the summer solstice. In other words, the sun had reached its summer house. Another summer solstice sunrise alignment can be found between the centre of Kiva A and the southeastern corner of room G. 3 winter solstice sunrise alignments can be found in the building between Kiva A and the southeastern corner of room B, between the circular room S and the centre of the recess in the southern wall, and between Kiva C and Kiva D. This was probably the most important time of the year for the ancient people. Solstice ceremonies were performed in part to usher the sun northward from its winter house. If these rituals were done poorly, or not conducted at all, there was concern that the sun might not return with its life-giving warmth. A summer solstice sunset alignment can be found between Kiva B and the small triangular room. In addition, a winter solstice sunset alignment runs from Kiva C to the centre of the walled-up door between the southern wall and the structure. The redundancy of alignments might have resulted from different ceremonial plans, each using either one of the 3 enclosed kivas or a single separate kiva outside the structure. Archaeologists have certainly been going into overdrive over the recent few years in Israel. Discoveries have been hitting the tabloids, describing amazing discoveries which lend support that human life, whoever they were, had existed on this part of the planet for longer than previously thought. Until recently, Ziklag, a city mentioned in the Bible, was thought to be just legend. However, a remarkable breakthrough uncovered this city from the pages of myth and brought it into the real world, allegedly. Problem being, this claim is only an opinion at this point, as no one can confirm that this actually is the city that David, the giant killer of the biblical pages, used to reside in. The ruins uncovered in central Israel are supposed to be the Philistine city of Ziklag, built some 5,500 years ago. The builders of the city lived in a turbulent area from the 12th century BC until 604 BC. Before being exiled, they had built and lived in huge cities which would themselves become legend. As the old saying goes, history is written by the victors, and it seems the assumptions made about the Philistines may have been a little presumptuous. Recent evidence received through DNA analysis and further archaeological excavations show that rather from being barbarians, they were actually cultured and highly skilled in archaeological prowess and everyday living. History would suggest that whilst David had left the city on business, it was raided and burned, and certainly archaeological evidence at this site would also show that the city had been burned. Former shepherd King David was the hero of the day, allegedly, slaying the Philistine warrior Goliath. But it seems his history was not all love and light in the eyes of his God, and punishment rained down. Scholars argue to this very day if David was an actual person, some claiming he was a myth. However, an inscription found on a stone erected by a king in Damascus in the late 9th to the 8th centuries contains a Hebrew phrase, house and David, which some suggest refers to the house of David. But as all good archaeologists know, this is by no means a supporting factor for a real person, as no doubt he was just as legendary then as he is now, and dating inscriptions in stones is almost impossible. So we are still left with a mystery surrounding him. Excavations began at the site in 2015, led by the Israeli Antiquities Authority. Located at Kirbet al-Rai, the extensive excavations have uncovered burned-out buildings and Philistine artifacts. Yosef Garfinkel, an archaeologist from the Hebrew University, told UPI that he was not 100% sure, but 90% that this was the biblical Ziklag. a tremendous amount of work will have to be undertaken before this find can truly be confirmed as zigzag. Meanwhile, in the Aegean Sea, archaeologists have been making a groundbreaking discovery which may uncover the origins of the early Greeks. Just 120 miles south of Athens, a small island called Chios is revealing its secrets and bringing to light a truly enormous amount of buildings ever presented around the world. Its style of building may actually also reflect the Greeks commonly believed that the gods lived on the highest points of their mountains. Chios is believed to be littered with buildings, and it has been estimated that in order to complete this monumental Bronze Age task, the early Greeks would have to have executed over 3,500 ceilings, bringing back a total of just over 10,000 tons of white marble to build a complex of 60 buildings. The stone was quarried from Naxos, an island just over 6 miles northwest of Chios. A leading maritime archaeologist at the University of Southampton, Dr. Julian Whitewright, said, "It is by far the largest prehistoric marine transportation operation that has ever come to light anywhere in the world, and it demonstrates quite clearly just how important and integral to their culture seafaring was to these early Bronze Age Aegean people." The smaller island, 100 metres away from Chios, called Deuskallio, was artificially altered to create terracing of over 1,000 metres, which was arranged in 6 levels. Each level was approximately 6 metres wide, and it has been assumed designed to accommodate the buildings that were erected on it. Strangely, though, the top of the island was not initially built upon and was left open, and suggestions have been put forward that it was possibly an offering site to the gods, who no doubt came down to collect. The site clearly displays advancements in the understanding of worship, construction, and living, which was far more advanced than previously thought by the early Greeks 4,600 years ago. The 4-year project on both islands has revealed lots in the last 12 months and exposes the true extent the islands held secret. It has been suggested the site was built within 100 years of Stonehenge in England, but its remarkable architectural style is unlike anything in its time throughout Europe. Clearly, this find will force us to reevaluate the ideas previously held about the Bronze Age, and those that lived in that time, as this small island produces a huge voice, as we must understand that the monumental building that was undertaken on the island is a reflection on a larger cultural and religious civilization which was to become huge over the following centuries. Understanding the complexity of quarrying, shipping, and building of the complex of Chios is a direct identifying marker that the civil system used by the early Bronze Age people had a stable and, for the most part, peaceful system, which is displayed in their architecture, as some of the white marble buildings even possessed 2 floors, a building style which would not be copied in Northern Europe for many thousands of years later. The style of the island is also unusual. This man-made pyramidal structure is being developed also at the early age of Egypt's pyramids, which begs the question, is there an overall spiritual connection to the pyramidal structure which would be reflected throughout history and around the world? For the Egyptians, the primordial mound, in which the creator god Atum enters our world, has similar examples around the world. This mound was symbolized by the obelisk, and with a shadowy history, which was to become a symbol of accessing power. The early obelisks were called Tikhonu, which translates to pierce, as a symbol of the primordial mound Atum used to come to this world. I can't help but wonder if it was some type of symbol referring to the piercing of dimensions. As the passing of time grew, so did the obelisks, with some reaching over 100 feet, and over this period they became more and more associated with sun worship, and their true meaning was hidden behind the pages of the ages. The idea of the sun reflecting off these pyramids and lighting them up would not only be a common belief in Egypt, but also with the Mesopotamians, as their creation myths also speak of a primordial mound, and it is possible the Greek island would shine like their counterparts in the early sunrise or late sunset. One of the world's leading experts on Greek mountaintop sanctuaries, Dr. Alan Peatfield of University College Dublin's School of Archaeology, said, "It is potentially a fundamental place of origin for the phenomena of sacred mountains within the Greek world." For those interested in visiting the islands, I wouldn't book a flight just yet, as visitors are strictly prohibited from visiting the islands. Read into that as you may. Using O'Brien's translation of the Karsek epic, can we determine the location of Eden? "And the Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden. There he put the man, whom he had formed. And out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food." Heads. The name of the first is Pison, and the name of the second river is Gihon, and the name of the third river is Hiddekel. That is it which goeth towards the east of Assyria. And the fourth river is the Euphrates. Garden of Eden, Genesis 2, verse 8 to 14. The work of astrophysicists and geologists demonstrate regular global catastrophes and migrations, with the destruction of cities caused by cometary debris impacts, not nuclear wars. Research has shown that our brilliant ancestors had been able to survive both the 10,850 BC global cataclysm, which has been described as the biggest mass extinction for 3 million years, and the consequent Great Younger Dryas Ice Age. So that when the planet began to warm up around 9,400 BC, succeeding generations were able to start again. O'Brien's translations reveal a small group of survivors led by An, Enlil, Enki, and Ninkersak, who created the Garden of the Gods in a crucial glacial refuge, which O'Brien places in the present-day Lebanon, irrigated by a critical snowmelt water supply shed from the flanks of Mount Hermon. The scientific evidence of agricultural origins in the Levantine corridor, now available to us, supports O'Brien's location of the Garden of the Gods in present-day Lebanon, and overturns With this settlement will come prosperity. An enclosed reservoir should be established. The good land is full of water. Because of the water, food will be plentiful. The Lady Ninkersak, Karsak, Epic number 2, a translation of archaic Sumerian cuneiform recovered from the remains of the Nippur Library in 1896. The detailed recorded history places the Garden of Eden in southern Lebanon, below Mount Hermon, and it was called Karsak, meaning head enclosure. A valley joins the watercourse and takes water from the western flanks of the Mount Hermon range. The cuneiform and Anokan records confirm that a dam was built here to create a reservoir, calculated to cover more than 50 acres, providing water for irrigation during the dry summer months. Many other sources, such as Plato, Charles Rowland, W.J. Perry, Ashurbanipal, Hadrian, and William Blake, refer to the wholly benevolent gods capable of wonderful feats. The ancient world had no doubts as to who had delivered agriculture and civilization, with many accounts giving clues as to the location of the meeting place of the Divine Council at Enlil's Ecker Mountain House close to Mount Hermon in Lebanon. O'Brien's detailed description of the Garden of the Gods, taken from the ancient texts, was confirmed by a Golden Age project survey at the site in November 2009. The gods moved on from Karsak, or Eden, to the Springhead site at Baalbek to dispense kingship and justice at the head of the two rivers, the Litani and the Orontes, not the Tigris and the Euphrates. O'Brien's work represents the most accurate records of our brilliant and benevolent ancestors who restarted civilization and agriculture under appalling difficulties. They delivered brilliant laws, domesticated crops and animals, introduced civilized living and superb social organization through the early city-state kingship systems, and who gifted mankind with many incredible technologies and skills which flourished over thousands of years in a golden age, recorded and respected by the ancient Greek historians and philosophers of Alexandria. The statue of Lady Karsak was placed in the middle of a 200-acre administrative centre on one of the Golden Age's great trading city-states on the Euphrates, 150 miles north of Babylon, named Mari. Mari was a fine example of the Divine Council's appointment kingship, the application of the laws, the edicts of On and Enlil, and the brilliant social organization of the Ananage. The city was dedicated to Karsak, wife of Enlil, goddess of irrigation, governor of the Garden of Eden, or Karsak, and mother of Inanna. She was also known as the Serpent Lady, Mala, Ma, Marie, goddess of the Basque, Kali, Ka, and Kutalku. Marie was founded around 4500 BC, a contemporary of Ur, further south down the Euphrates. Together with other cities in the Jordan Valley and Canaan, over 200 craft trades and guilds were formally recorded there before 3000 BC. The first of these global devastations brought an end to the great city of Urk, with the second bringing of the Golden Age to an end in this area, accompanied by climate change moving monsoon rains south, leading to the desiccation of the Sahara, Arabian, and Thar desert areas. These events triggered major migrations around the world. So in conclusion, O'Brien's translation found that there were no Sumerians before 3378 BC, no slave species, no Nibiru, a name for Nippur with B and P being interchangeable, no nuclear wars between the gods, and no 1950s space technology, space helmets, splashdowns, and no gold used for repairing damaged atmospheres. The Abzu was in southern Lebanon, not South Africa. Agriculture was restarted at Karsak, meaning head enclosure, in the southern Baca and Jordan Valley around 9400 BC, following the Great Younger Dryas Ice Age by angels and watchers, the culture bearers who took the technology and seeds around the world in the following 2000 years, well before the building of Eridu in Mesopotamia's valley around 5500 BC. Farming was recorded as being delivered into Mesopotamia by the Apkallu, bright farmers from the enclosure, or Genii, genius, angels and watchers, under the Enki, a title for the lord of the land, and Enlil, title of the lord of the civilization or plough, and also the title for the lord of the spirits. The great cities were dedicated out of respect to their original lineage leaders and their families, led by On, the monotheistic god of Abraham. At 6,500 years older than Stonehenge and 7,000 years before the pyramids were constructed, a cult megalithic complex sat on top of the hills near current-day Şanlıurfa in southeast Turkey. Göbekli Tepe was flourishing an astonishing 12,000 to 14,000 years ago, and today the preserved remains still exhibit high degrees of sophistication and megalithic engineering skill. Back in the 1990s, when Robert Schoch exclaimed that the Sphinx could be many thousands of years older than previously thought, he was ridiculed. Graham Hancock's popular theories of a 12,000-year-old Ice Age civilization were slammed. Now today, there stands a unique and remarkably ancient complex that is shaking the foundations of science and history, awakening an interest in our human origins, and has been carbon dated by German archaeologists to the end of the last Ice Age. In September 2013, I had the opportunity to go and see Göbekli Tepe for myself. I joined forces with authors Andrew Collins and Graham Hancock on a megalithomania expedition around Turkey to investigate this enigmatic discovery. Graham was as astonished as I was. For such an old structure, the quality of stonework and abstract artistic skill just seems like it should not have existed at this time. American archaeologist Peter Benedict first discovered something was going on there in 1963, noticing prehistoric flints all over the area. He also discovered some broken fragments of beautiful crafted T-shaped blocks with reliefed carvings. However, due to the superior quality of the stonework, they were classified as Byzantium artifacts. Interestingly, the stone is now on display in Urfa Museum. Looks conspicuously like one I have previously seen in Silistani in Peru. In 1994, a German archaeologist, Klaus Schmidt, recognized Göbekli Tepe as part of a pre-pottery Neolithic culture because this style of carving was similar to a site he had worked on earlier. What strikes people when they visit this site is the intricacy of the stonework, the size of the megalithic pillars, and the sheer magnitude of the man-made hill it was carefully covered with. The original construction was built on solid bedrock. Then mounts were constructed on top of these, and further structures built on top over a period of around 2,000 years, with the final enclosures containing smaller stones and less sophistication than the earlier levels. The larger, older pillars at the lower levels show bas-relief carvings of various animals, reptiles, birds, and serpents. Some pillars seem to represent strange, abstract statues of humans wearing space-age belts, with long bent arms and H-type letters on every pillar in enclosure D. Most impressive is a strange creature in three-dimensional high relief showing beautiful craftsmanship and originality for the period. So there are several types of relief carvings at Göbekli Tepe: the 3D high relief, the shallow reliefs of animals, H's on the humanoid arms and belts, plus a rougher style that occurs in the later levels, although incredibly, this still dates to around 8,000 years ago. I found the shaping of the pillars interesting too. Why choose such a specific design? It is an abstract construction that sits gently in the bedrock in very shallow pits. Some of the pillars are 18 foot high, with the top part of the T carved to look it is a separate block of the main pillar, although it is actually one piece. There are finely carved rims and shaping that reminded me of Teotihuacano in Bolivia and some other sites around Peru. Another interesting aspect of the site are the unusual cup marks that are found mainly in the bedrock, but also on top of some of the oldest of the pillars that at some point shed some light on the cup mark phenomena in Britain many thousands of years later. As part of the expedition, we also visited a Hittite site called Al-Kahuyo near Ankara, the main capital city of Turkey. Its earliest inhabitants were the Hittians, who were earth-based goddess worshippers with roots in the Stone Age who flourished from around 2350 BC to 1700 BC. Although much younger than Göbekli Tepe, the megalithic walls were indistinguishable from polygonal walls found all over Peru. The jigsaw, irregularly shaped blocks, and some weighing more than 20 tons apiece, are a unique style that were once thought to only exist in that part of South America, but in my travels, I have seen them all up the west coast of Italy, on Easter Island, and in Egypt. Plus, they have been photographed in Delphi, Greece, Albania, Saudi Arabia, and Japan. Although separated by many millennia and vast distances, this style is possibly the most difficult style to accomplish, as each block needs to be carved extremely accurately, so they fit together and stay together over the years, even through earthquakes. But at Alca-Huyuk and nearby Itusu, they are not flat-faced walls. They look puffy, basically protruding from the joints, which some researchers say look like pillows. It does not seem to follow any particular plan, but it is a popular technique favoured by the ancient megalithic builders. This begs the question, was there a global megalithic stonemasonry elite in prehistory? Did they disuse this influence around the world and construct specific sites? And with so many similarities to sites in Peru and Bolivia, there was only one thing to do. Fortunately, I was organising a megalithomania trip to Peru and Bolivia in November 2013 with David Hatcher Childress and Brian Forrester. We headed to Cusco, the navel of the world. Interestingly, Göbekli Tepe's name has a similar meaning, Hill of the Navel, and is one of many navels or sacred centres. Cusco is a megalithic city. Its foundations are made up of polygonal and precision carved stone, which is quite a sight when you first visit there. Further southwest on the shores of Lake Titicaca, the strange chopas that are originally circular funerary towers are built in huge megalithic blocks and hold several ancient secrets. On high bluffs, always with a steep climb up to them, these towers are a mystery, made with startling engineering precision, obviously meant to last for several generations. The most famous example is Solistani, a site I have visited many times. Not only does it have circular towers, it's a unique square chopa that is made of huge, finely cut polygonal blocks. The mystery here is that it is almost perfect match to one of the platforms on Easter Island, some 2,600 miles away across the Pacific Ocean. Solistani has several relief carvings that closely resemble those of Göbekli Tepe, including serpents, lizards, foxes, pumas, and other unusual creatures. One tower that is partly intact shows a beautiful but very weathered lizard that can be seen at certain times of the day when the sun reaches round its location on the tower. Perhaps as the sun revolved around the circular towers, the reliefs got exposed only by certain times of the day. Could this have been an unusual clock, or did it have some other shamanic meaning? I wonder if Göbekli Tepe was used in a similar way, as whoever repaired the site and covered it with thousands of tons of dirt may have wanted to keep the pillars and therefore the reliefs in the correct position, suggesting they may hold astronomical secrets that have yet to be deciphered. Corimbo is another chopa site further round the lake, about 25 kilometres from Puno, the nearest major town. The stonework here reaches another level of complexity, with the beautiful puffy polygonal stonework, along with some exquisite reliefs, including serpents, pumas, and even faces of creatures emerging from the rock. As you can see from the images, the similarities of Göbekli Tepe are there. The faces that emerge from the rock look like the stone totem statue from Göbekli Tepe, now an earthen museum. Near the entrance of Corimbo, amongst pillars of broken stone, a unique relief of a cheeky critter sits upon a lump of rock that was part of one of the towers. It looks like some kind of feline, but its unusual elongated fingers are an anomaly. This one closely resembles the vertical creature, the solitary high relief at Göbekli Tepe. At a site about 6 miles from Tehuacano in Bolivia, a 3-foot wide ceramic bowl was discovered that shows Proto-Sumerian writing next to indigenous Amharic script. It has been labelled the Rosetta Stone of South America. Not only does it suggest Sumerian visitors once arrived at the shores of Lake Titicaca, it also has been translated, and the use of this type of script has been dated to 3500 BC. What does it mean? It certainly looks like there was an ancient visit by Sumerians around 5,500 years ago, and when we look at the location of where the language was being used, suddenly we see a direct connection between Tehuacano and the builders of Göbekli Tepe and surrounding sites. Arthur Pozansky, the eminent archaeologist of Bolivia, dated Tehuacano to around 17,000 years old, based upon archaeoastronomy. However, since his initial deductions, this date has been revised several times, with the Fuente Magna Bowl possibly nailing down one date at least. When you visit Tehuacano or Timapuku, they look like cataclysm has given its best shot to destroy them a very long time ago. And with the evidence of advanced agriculture beginning in both South America and the Fertile Crescent at the same time, we must reconsider the idea that perhaps the Fuente Magna Bowl is in fact just part of a long cross-cultural bond that had existed for thousands of years. It can easily be argued that these distant cultures are divided not only by space, but by time, and that they would have come up with these ideas independently. not so sure, because carving high reliefs, constructing polygonal walls, quarrying and transporting supersized megaliths are not things that you can put away as simple coincidences that any culture would just come up with, as they are particularly difficult to achieve. Since the discovery of Göbekli Tepe, the redating of the sites in Peru and Bolivia needs some more investigation, as this kind of sophistication at this incredibly early date could be the shake-up academia needs, and it gives a new view into our ancestral megalithic origins. Dubai cultivates an ultra-modern image of dazzling architecture and effortless wealth, yet its deserts conceal forgotten cities and a hidden history which reveal how its early inhabitants adapted and overcame dramatic past climate change. There is no question that Dubai is the ultimate 21st century city. It boasts the tallest building in the world, attracts 13 million visitors per year, and its airport recently claimed the crown of busiest in the world by number of international passengers. So it's understandable that archaeology and antiques are not things that most people associate with Dubai and the United Arab Emirates. Yet this desert kingdom has a surprisingly rich history. Far from being an empty desert, the UAE has many lost cities and archaeological sites that are only now being explored, and which reveal an unexpected story of human development in the Arabian Peninsula from over 100,000 years ago, when humans first ventured out of Africa through millennia of a nomadic hunter-gatherer existence to developing farming and then becoming a major centre for world-changing technology, bronze. 5,000 years ago, developments in the Hajar Mountains east of Dubai changed the world. After millennia of supporting only a meagre hunter-gatherer existence, the area near the present border with Oman is found to be a rare source of copper. Pretty soon, men learned how to mine it, extract the metal, and mix it with tin to produce bronze. The land of Maghreb, as it was known, rapidly became the major supplier of bronze for tools and weapons to the entire Middle East region, and in particular to the world's first cities, which were emerging in Samaria at the time. Cities such as Ur and Uruk. Bronze helped make farming more efficient and civilization possible in these places. Numerous buildings, tombs and sections of Falaj watercourses dating from this time have been excavated over an area of about 50 acres at Hilli, just north of Al Ain, the UAE's third largest city, and are the centrepiece of the UAE's only UNESCO World Heritage Site. The highlight is a beautiful restored circular tomb, roughly 10 metres in diameter, with a decorated entranceway with two arcs carved above it. Stone blocks cut so precisely that you couldn't fit a piece of dental floss between them. They're like a smaller version of the great Inca stone walls of Machu Picchu, except that those are relatively recent constructions at a mere 500 years old, whereas the stonework on the Hilli tomb is 4,700 years old. Moving forward to 2,000 years, iron had replaced bronze and was revolutionizing life in the Arab Peninsula, and a key location for producing and working iron was Malaya, a fortified town on the edge of the desert near Al Dayat, roughly an hour's drive from Dubai. In its heyday, at around the time of Christ, Malaya was one of the largest settlements in the region, a city a mile wide with hundreds of houses and metalworking sites, continuously inhabited for over 500 years from the Mid-Iron Age until the 1st century AD, when it was abandoned and forgotten, walls left to crumble and covered by drifting sand. The partly restored walls of the large, square fortified iron foundry, about 200 feet square, are today housed under a metal hangar. Excavations have revealed 2 iron foundries, producing both weapons and coins, protected by the fort and surrounded by many houses, indicating that a significant number of people lived and worked there. Iron ingots and finished products were transported from Malaya north to the coast of Talabrak and Ador, from where they were shipped up the Persian Gulf to customers in Mesopotamia and the Levant. Talabrak and Ador are remarkable sites in their own right. Talabrak itself was continuously inhabited for 2,000 years, from soon after Hilli was occupied, and has been an active archaeological site for many years. Nearby, Ador lies on the coast opposite modern Al Qayan, and is an enormous site of about 4 miles across. It is easy to explore, the stones of its ancient houses lying undisturbed amongst the coastal sand dunes. One of the most famous cities of Arabia, tantalizingly so because historians have known it existed from written records but simply could not find it, is the medieval city of Jofar, home to the legendary Arabian seafarer Ahmed ibn Majid, as well as allegedly to the fictional Sinbad the sailor. Jofar thrived for thousands of years before falling into ruin and disappearing from human memory for almost 2 centuries. Unlike the desert cities above, Jofar was a thriving port, in fact the hub of southern Gulf Arabic trade in the Middle Ages. Jofar was known to be somewhere in the Persian Gulf, north of Dubai, but the actual site was only found by archaeologists in the 1960s. The earliest signs of the settlement found in the site date from the 6th century, by which time its inhabitants were already trading as far afield as India and the Far East on a routine basis. The 10th to the 14th centuries were a golden age for Jofar, and for long-distance Arab trading and seafaring, with Arab navigators routinely travelling halfway around the world. Arabs had sailed into European waters long before Europeans succeeded in navigating through the Indian Ocean and onto the Persian Gulf, for instance. As the main base for these voyages and trade, Jofar was the largest and most important city in the southern Gulf for over 1,000 years. Arab merchants routinely made the mammoth 18-month sea voyage as far as China and traded almost everything imaginable. Such a valuable commercial centre attracted constant attention from rival powers, though. The Portuguese took control in the 16th century, by which time Jofar was a substantial city of around 70,000 people. A century later, the Persians seized it, only to lose it in 1750 to the Qawasim tribe from Sharjah, who established themselves next door to Ras Al Khaimah, which they continue to rule to this day, leaving the old Jafar to the gradual decay until its ruins became forgotten amongst the coastal sand dunes. Today, most of Jafar, in all likelihood, remains still hidden beneath the sprawling dunes north of Ras Al Khaimah. The desert, which covers roughly 95% of the UAE, undoubtedly still hides many secrets. Almost every year, significant discoveries are made which fill in a few more blank spaces in the jigsaw puzzle of this most remarkable country's past. However, all of these sites, plus many more, described more fully in my book Beyond Dubai, Seeking Lost Cities in the Emirates, are within an hour's drive of Dubai and readily accessible to the public, adding a different and exotic dimension to any visit to this most modern of cities. The cultural heritage of Syria is being deliberately destroyed by militants and extremists using bulldozers and explosives. In the United Arab Emirates, UAE, history is also being destroyed by bulldozers
Thanks for being
and
here.
explosives,
Signing
this
off
time
now.
in the name of progress. The Hajar
Thanks
Mountains,
Toad,
the
thanks
northern
Christian,
coast of
thanks
Emirates, are particularly rich
Moonraker, everybody who's here,
most of them only
lurkers.
discovered in the last 20 years.
Have a good day. We might raid somebody.
So far, around 500 petroglyphs have been identified at 70 different sites, most of them in Fujairah and Ras Al Khaimah. They most often show animals and people, sometimes
Scotty AV. Oh yes,
sometimes geometric design.
this is gonna be a sick stream.
Tragically, hundreds of these petroglyphs have been destroyed in the last 5 years through quarrying of stone in order to build roads and artificial offshore islands such as the Palm Island and the Whirl Islands in Dubai. While the petroglyphs are not as
Scotty is pretty much the coolest guy ever.
large as the ruins in Palmyra, they contain unique clues as to life of people in the Iron Age and area. Australian archaeologist Dr. Michelle Zolkowski has almost single-handedly led an effort to record as many as possible. Alone at first, but more recently joined the archaeologists.